Hey guys, welcome to Brian's Man Cave. So today's another discussion video. I want to talk about the importance, or is there an importance, in having music in video games. Now, I've done a video a long time ago, way back, talking about, favorite video games that have music, or favorite music from video games. But the reason why this topic kind of came to mind is, my current project that I'm working on. Well, I'm actually working on like a few projects right now for making a game for the Intellivision, or games. I'm working on my food fight game, which is pretty much done. The only thing that's missing is music or sound. And the other game I'm working on, the same idea. I'm going to have to get music and sound. And it always comes down to, what am I going to do? Am I going to try and do it myself? Get somebody else to make the sound for me? And then I started thinking about, back when, obviously back in the day, a lot of games really didn't have sound. Like, if you think about it, if you go back to like the earlier Intellivision games, even the Atari games, if you think about like Pitfall, they had sound effects, but they didn't have music playing throughout the whole thing all the time. This one didn't, Pitfall didn't really, but then some did, and they had a pretty big impact. I mean, look at Pitfall 2. That is like a great soundtrack. In fact, they had to put like, I believe, a special chip in here, just to make it get that sound effect to happen. Just to get that music to happen, and it's a big part of the game. But is it always a big part of the game? Games like Hero for the Atari 2600, really great game. One of the best games. No sound, like no music. It's got sound effects, but no music. Now, sound effects are important. I'll grant that. A lot of games do sometimes. Well, some games actually require sound effects. I think it's called Aqua something. Oh, geez, I can't remember the name. But there's an Atari game. You've probably played it. It's an Activision game, and it does require sound effects of different things. I think it's Sequest. Maybe that's the game name, Sequest. I don't know. I was thinking Aqua Adventure, which was like a prototype. But anyways, yeah, so it just got me thinking, like, certain games do have some great sound effects, but are they necessary? Like, music-wise, not sound effects, sorry, music. Are they necessary? Now, of course, there's always the franchise stuff, or, like this is Popeye, which has, like, the Popeye soundtrack. Even E.T. for the Atari. When you boot up E.T. for the Atari 2600, it plays the E.T. music. And that was just kind of like a small thing they threw in there that, if it wasn't there, it probably wouldn't have made any difference to the game itself. I mean, it just kind of gave that little bit of extraness. Extraness? Is that a word? It just throws that in there. Now, of course, we're talking about the old games here, where memory and the chip itself was expensive, and it's not that programmers couldn't do it. It's just they didn't have the budget, pretty much. Some games on the Atari, you do get some that have the music playing throughout, and then it could sometimes get irritating. And then I also thought about, even Nintendo. Nintendo has a lot of, no, I mean the NES. I'm talking about, the old Nintendo, the old NES stuff. Some games had some really great sounds in it, like, Mario Brothers, epics. Everybody knows the Super Mario Brothers tune plays while you're playing the game. It's great for the first few minutes, and then after a while, it repeats itself. Same with Super Mario 3. Each area had its own special sounds, its own music. It was, great. It was great to have it. But oftentimes, I would end up turning the volume on my monitor or whatever I was playing on. Usually, I had my Commodore 64 monitor that I played a lot of these things on. But I'd turn it off, and then I would put on my own soundtrack. I'd put on, whatever music I was listening to at the time. And then, Nirvana or Red Hot Chili Peppers or Metallica or something. Whatever I was listening to at that time in my life, I would turn off the sound, because oftentimes it wasn't important. You didn't really need to have the sound in the background. So I just turned it off and put on my favorite tunes. But there were some Nintendo games that I gave an exception to. This one for sure, Simon's Quest. I just love the music in this. I don't know what it is about it. It's just so catchy. It's fun. It changes as the night changes, and When you go into a town, you get a nice, like, I think all the music in this game is just, it's great. I love it. I always love listening to this one. But then, there's other games where, like I said, it really doesn't matter. Like Donkey Kong. I mean, there's so little music in that. Who cares? But I kind of reflect on that. Like, even some of the Commodore 64 games that I've played. One game that always comes to mind when I think about music is Rags to Riches, which is another game that I've made an actual version for that for the in television, which I hope to get released very soon. But in the very beginning of the level, when you every morning, so I know it's not a very popular game, but some people are aware of it. But basically, when you wake up in the morning, it plays this song. And I just loved that song when I was a kid. I was like, I didn't even know what it was. I thought the programmer made it up. I was like, wow, this, great. I love the tune. It plays for a little bit and then it stops. So it plays and then it ends and then the song's gone until the next morning. Which I think is fine because it would start to drive me nuts after a while. And then after a while, like after a long time in my life, when I started looking up the game and I started thinking about programming it, I'm like, well, how am I going to get that tune in there? Because I don't know anything about that tune. And I looked it up, and it turns out it's actually a Mozart piece. I'm like, well, there you go. It was written by Mozart, for crying out loud. No wonder why it's such a great piece. And I never would have thought of that. And since I've been actually programming and looking at, games that need music in it, because everybody wants to have music in their game, even if you have an option that says turn it off, which I think some people really want to go for that option. They'll listen to the music in the beginning, go, hey, cool, turn it off, please. It drives me nuts. But what music are you going to include in the game? Now you can go and write your own music, write your own piece, or you could try and use something popular, but you got to be careful with that, with licensing and all that stuff. If you start dropping in tunes from pop culture, or you start putting in Nirvana into your game, they can sue you. So you got to be careful. And then there's all these other classic pieces, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, all that stuff. You can pretty much just get that out of some archive and use it, right? So, and then I thought, well, how important is it? Like, do you really need music in the game? Like I said, sound effects do make sense. I mean, if you play something like The Legend of Zelda, when he plays the pipe, he makes the little pipe sound. Even in Mario Brothers or Super Mario Brothers 3, there's some sound effects that make sense. But in most cases, the game will function with or without that sound effect. And in majority of the time, the game will function with or without the music. So that's just something I was just thinking about. And, I just want to throw it out there because there's a lot of games that, sometimes the music is generic and boring. Like, what is up with Back to the Future on the Nintendo? I have it in there. I should have grabbed that one, but it's okay. Back to the Future on Nintendo. We all know that was pretty much of a mess of a game. LJN title. They had the opportunity there to use a really great song, probably due to licensing, like I just said. And, I've talked about this in previous videos, about the whole licensing mess and, using things. But somehow they had the ability to use the Back to the Future license. They have the picture of Marty McFly. They have the picture of Doc, the DeLorean. They got it all there. The game is called Back to the Future. But they didn't have the music. And the music was like a big part of that franchise. Like, everybody knows the power of love. When they hear that, they think about Back to the Future. And vice versa. You watch Back to the Future, you're going to hear the power of love. And you're going to think, great song. And yet, the video game was absent of that. You would think that would be the very first song that you would hear when they put that in the Nintendo. But it wasn't there. It was like some generic sound. And I even remember, I don't know who did. Maybe it was the Angry Video Game Nerd. Pointed out that some of the music from the Nintendo, the early lineup, they used in multiple games. Like, I think one of the same. I don't remember the game. I think one of them was like a soccer game, and then the other one was like a platformer game. But it was the exact same music just thrown in there, generic music, which made me wonder, like, so what was the point of that? Like, I guess just to have a tune in there. What's stopping you from just, like I said earlier, put on your own tunes, but, you know, get a stereo. Now, that being said, I mean, I'm finding a hard time getting myself set up with a stereo system at all anyways. But, you know, if you're playing it on your computer, you have your media player and stuff like that. You could play it there. You got your iPod, iPhone, iPod. Who uses an iPod? Does anybody use an iPod? Do you use one? Anyways, yeah, that's what I was getting at. It's just something to think about. Like, I know a lot of people do love the music in some like, you know, obviously the soundtracks of video games and modern games get released on their own. A lot of work, a lot of orchestration, a lot of stuff gets put into modern games because they can handle it, the CDs, the DVDs, or whatever they're made on, the digital formats. They can have like full-blown music, and you know, that's fine. But I'm talking about the really old, the old stuff. You know, the stuff that I love. Anyways, let me know what you think. Throw some comments down below. Maybe throw in some of your favorite song from video games, and let me know if you think it's really important to have it or not. Anyways, hope you liked the video, hope you subscribe, and we'll talk to you later.